Rusty Quill presents the Magnus Archives.
Alright, so let's really get into it, okay? So, let's talk about Magnus Archives. So, a few things. You probably can't see it all that well right now, so I'm just gonna post a picture like right there. I have been doing journal entries for myself for Magnus Archives. So we're gonna start off with episode number 1. Episode number 1 is called The Anglerfish. And I'm gonna break down the entire episode and just tell you how I feel about it. No spoilers for a few other seasons, maybe except for one. So, to start off, of course, title is Anglerfish. We start off with our victim named Nathan. Now, Nathan is doing an entry, says that the event is around 2010, and he gives a statement around 2012. So, he hears after coming out of a party that he went to with a couple of his buddies and friends, he goes out to an alleyway to smoke a cigarette. Now, he hears, "Can I have a cigarette?" in this little small alleyway. And mind you, if you hear that in a small alleyway and all you can see is a fucking dark figure, are you gonna walk towards the dark figure? Anyways, so we can see that this is some white people shit. But basically, the figure in the shadows is like swaying a little bit. He learned that his face ended up being blank, which did scare him. And he was just sitting there. It scared him in a way where he didn't run away, which is the weird part, because if you see that the person's face is blank, you're not just gonna run off. He offered the cigarette after the figure said, "Can I have a cigarette?" And he heard nothing back, and so the figure asked again, "Can I have a cigarette?" So of course the figure, quote unquote, is addicted to cigarettes, I guess. This is when our boy Nathan finally figures out that the figure has no mouth, and that the figure isn't even standing. The figure is completely floating in the air. We'll see if I can do an example right there. It's just floating in the air, really, really creepy. And he tried to pull a flashlight out via, on his little phone, which I don't know why it took him so long to do that. I guess because he was freaked out or anxiety or whatever. And as soon as he tried to pull it out, the figure was folded in half and disappeared into the darkness. Now, as soon as you see that, aren't you gonna run away? Like my boy Nathan. Now, the following day, he does go to this same alleyway place. I don't know why. But he does go in the daytime, and he does find a red pack of unsmoked cigarettes. And he finds a singular one already out, so the pack is just sitting on the ground with a singular one out next to it. I'll see if I can find a picture and put it here. But then, a few days later, there's so many missing persons reports that come out from the people who were at the party. John Fellow, which is one of his friends who was also at the party, smoked red cigarettes and was missing. So, could have been the person who got snatched. White people shit, honestly. This episode specifically is such an iconic episode, just because, you start off learning about the anglerfish, which of course has always been a mythological, little figure creature. I'll put up a picture of the anglerfish right there. And everyone loved it. There was even photos and pictures of people having it on their walls, and it's such a good episode. And then I learned something. Spoiler ahead. You can stop now if you want to, but we will hear a little bit more about the anglerfish because there's an episode that comes out that's a continuation of the anglerfish. I haven't listened to it yet, but I've been told that by some friends. Now, because I know this is such a short video, I am going to talk about the second one. It'll be attached to this video too. Let me know if you like it so far. Another day, another episode about Magnus Archives. So, on today's episode, which is episode number 2, oh my god, it's gotta be one of my favorite, no, I wouldn't say one of my favorite, but it's definitely up there more than anglerfish. Again, this is my second to third time listening to the episodes again, but of course, here's my little journal entry. Of course, I'll put like all the little segments I'm talking about up here as per usual. Anyways, let's get right into it. So, we start off, the date is November 22nd of 1988, so mind you, anglerfish happened after this episode, and the victim's name is Joshua Collapsey. So, just, keep in mind for some of those victim names, some of the events that happened. So, Mr. Joshua himself was out partying and had a bunch of alcohol in his system, and he met this random guy at a cafe, and it was like, okay, a man sat with him, and it was like, all right, who are you? And so, of course, under the influences, he's listening to what this guy has to say, he's listening to him, he's like, okay, how a regular person would be under the influence. Now, mind you, this guy has brown hair, his name is Joshua, he's very short, and he's from Liverpool. And he fronts him and he says, hey, I'll give you $10,000, not dollars, 10,000 pounds if you do me an undisclosed favor at some point. So would any drug/alcoholic addict do? They accepted the money. Of course, a few days after this, Joshua becomes paranoid. He doesn't want to spend the money because he's like, oh my god, if I spend the money, like, is something bad gonna happen? Is this drug money? Like, is this blood money? Like, what money is this? And so, he was checking, like, his suitcases and stuff, because mind you, this happened on vacation for him, because he was on vacation. And he was checking his suitcase to make sure that, like, the guy didn't slip any drugs into his suitcase, or for things like that, too. But he finally spent it a year later. He didn't spend it for a whole year. He spent it a year later on a 1-bedroom flat. Mind you, 1-bedroom flat is $10,000. A week after he moves in, he gets a note. He gets like a delivery to his door, and it's these two guys, and they're like, oh, are you Joshua Collapsey? And he's like, yeah, I'm Joshua Collapsey, why? And they're like, we have a delivery for you. And he's like, well, I didn't deliver anything. And they're like, no, here's your delivery. They bring in this large box, and like, he finally opens the box, and he sees that it's a big coffin that has metal chains on it. There's one note that says do not open, and the other one says thanks with gratitude, J, which is for John, I'm guessing. But he's just sitting there like, what am I going to do with the coffin? Should I open it? Should I not open it? There's a big lock on there, too. And he also has the key as well. Joshua decides not to open the box because he's smarter than the anglerfish guy. And so he decides, all right, I'm not going to open it. Instead, I am just going to ignore the presence of it being here. Then at night, he starts to hear moaning and scratching and all of these weird-ass noises. He started having trouble sleeping. Like, one of the first days that he had it, he had a nightmare that he was choking. And so he was, like, having immense trouble sleeping. Sometimes he would wake up to him sleepwalking, grabbing the key. One night, he woke up with the key in his hand. The next night, he woke up with the key in the lock already. So it was more so a thing of like his sleep was getting messed up, he didn't know what to do, he didn't want to open it, and he thought that it was weird that he was unconsciously trying to open it because he never had any other history of sleepwalking. Then he has this bright idea 1.5 years later where he's like, you know what, how about I just put the key in a container full of water and I put it in the freezer. And that's what he did. Now he did wake up a few times after that, like with the cold ice block in his hand, but that normally woke him up. And so now he was able to actually get better sleep as well, which is the crazy part. Mind you, he goes through this for 1.5 years. 1.5 years. For $10,000, would you do that? Anyways, 1.5 years later, John shows up with his 2 little delivery guys, and they're all shocked, surprised as fuck to see him, and they're like, oh, you're alive? And Joshua's just sitting there like, no shit, Sherlock, I'm alive. Was I not supposed to be alive? Finally, Joshua goes back into his bedroom and he's like, okay, go deal with the fucking thing. He put the coffin in his living room, so they dragged the coffin out of the living room, and according to his file, he said that he heard screaming, and so because he heard screaming, he was like, yeah, I'm not gonna go out there. Which, Joshua, I don't fucking mind that you didn't go out there, honestly. Some important notes from this episode. That was all of the plot and a little lore. All of the important notes for this episode that they found was that Tim found the delivery company that the coffin came through on, which of course props to Tim. And he also found out that Joshua was the only one in the building. Like, no one else was in the building, only him. And he was the only person renting. So all of those screams and the moanings and everything had to have been coming from that coffin. And who knows what would have happened if he would have actually opened the coffin. Hi from the future. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you like it, or if there's anything that I can improve for the video, please let me know down in the comments or anything. Love you guys. See you guys next week.